Dear Helen, the floor is all yours.
Hello, my name is Helen McCann. I'm in the UK. Sorry, I don't think my camera is quite right. Um, Let me just adjust this. Sorry. Okay, that's better. Uh, I am a registered blind guide dog owner. I was first diagnosed with a hearing loss when I was just 5 years old. I can remember this as clearly as if it was yesterday. I was at the hospital with my mother, and the consultant told her, "Don't bother wasting your time. She will never achieve anything." Which I didn't hear him say these words, I lip read what he said. Uh, I always think that when professionals make these statements, they should actually think hard before they say these things. No one can know how anyone will progress in their life. I went to a normal school. We call it a mainstream school. It wasn't a special school. I had no special help. I had to work hard in that school. There were 35 children in my class, and I was lucky that I had a mother who was a teacher. So I started school able to read, which meant that I had a lot of independent skills that I might not otherwise have had. At the age of 10 or 11 in the UK, we have an exam called the 11 plus. That exam decides what school you actually go to from your first school. I was one of 4 children out of 90 children my age who passed the 11 plus and went on to what we call a grammar school. I actually went through grammar school and ultimately trained and qualified to teach maths, which wasn't bad for someone who was written off at the age of 5. Uh, I managed through school without using hearing aids because I was uncomfortable with them. They made a lot of noise. It was very visible. A box on my front with wires coming up to both ear, and it brought me a lot of attention, which I wasn't comfortable with. I preferred to blend into the background. I didn't want people to notice me, and I didn't want people to notice me for all the wrong reasons. I started off, I was teaching, I was driving, doing all the normal things. I got married, I had children. I was expecting my second child when I was told that I had a condition called retinitis pigmentosa and that I would be registered blind within 10 years. This was not great news. I was 29, had a 2-year-old, and was about to have a baby. Nobody wanted to hear that kind of news. I spent a couple of days feeling sorry for myself and then decided I can't do this. It's not fair on my family if I give up or start feeling sorry for myself and just not being able to cope. I decided at that point I needed to live one day at a time and just take each day as it came. I couldn't live with every day thinking what I might be doing in 10 years' time. So for me, it was a better option to focus on one day at a time and just continue with what I was doing. I continued teaching and I was able to drive for a bit longer, though I had to have eye checks every year to check that I was still safe to drive, and until the point where they said, no, it's not safe for you to drive anymore. At the age of 32, I was also diagnosed with systemic lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. I dealt with that in the same way as everything else, thinking, how can I actually help myself? What can I do to help myself control this disease? And what I did was looked very carefully at my diet, the exercise I did, and just generally how I lived my life. So by doing that, I was able to keep those conditions well under control. I was 44 when I was eventually registered blind and I had to give up teaching. By this time, I had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, and who had grown up with the knowledge that I couldn't see in the same way as other people, but I think it makes them better people because they have empathy for people dealing with any kind of disability. At the point I gave up teaching, I didn't really know what to do with my life. I thought about retraining, but if I had retrained, the job I would have liked to have gone into was law. The other thing that happened for me when I was 38, I realized that if I didn't do something about my hearing, I was going to be in a very lonely, dark place because I relied so heavily on my sight to be able to hear, because I would lip read what people said. So at that point, I actually bought some tiny in-the-ear hearing aids, which I will show you. There was a time when I first got those, I would have never, ever shown those to anyone, because the thing I was very, very sensitive about was my hearing, primarily because that was what I got a lot of teasing and unkind comments about when I was younger. It was a long, long time before I actually was comfortable with sharing that I had a hearing loss. That point came much later, much later. I was not too long after I had to give up teaching, I applied for my first guide dog, and that completely changed my life again, because I got to the point where I couldn't go out on my own unless someone was with me, because it was no longer safe. The retinitis pigmentosa causes tunnel vision. You lose all your peripheral vision. So I couldn't see things that were below me, above me, or to the sides. And tunnel vision is the main problem with RP. I'm also totally blind in the dark. I have trouble with differentiating colours, so I can't see yellow. Purple looks like it's brown. There's all sorts of colours that I can't actually see. But if I'm in doubt, I just ask. And it's become something that my family and friends, we laugh about, because there's no point taking life too seriously. It's just one of those things. I'm not colourblind. I just can't differentiate the colours because of the light that gets into the retina. So after I trained with my guide dog, I decided what I wanted to do was to raise money and work as a volunteer for guide dogs. And I did this in all kinds of ways. Some of the time it was just standing with a bucket, collecting money, might have had a coffee morning, or even an auction, or to raise funds for the charity. When I was, oh goodness me, 2008, I heard about a walk, an old pilgrim walk across northern Spain called the Camino de Santiago. That route starts at the Pyrenees and it goes all the way across the mountains of northern Spain to Santiago de Compostela. I did this with the help of a guide. I did not take my guide dog. It would not have been fair to my dog to be doing that. I wrecked my own feet. Wouldn't be fair to do that to my dog's paws. I actually, just doing that one challenge, managed to raise £5,000 for guide dogs and was able to name and sponsor a guide dog puppy in memory of my mother. 3 years later, in 2011, hadn't done with this walk yet, I went back again to take on the Camino and managed to raise a further £5,000 to name a second guide dog puppy. Over the years that followed from then, for a few years, I was just doing more routine fundraising things, having coffee mornings and collections and things like that. And then in 2016, in September, somebody said to me, "Why don't you run the Bath Half Marathon?" I said, "Because I don't run." And I thought that was a good enough reason. The most strenuous thing I had ever run was a Bath, and I was being asked to run the Bath Half Marathon, 13.1 miles. I'd never run in my life. I wasn't a runner. I actually go so far as to say I actually hated running. When I told my daughter what I was doing, she said, "But you hate running." And I said, "Yeah, I do." She said, "Well, why are you doing this?" I said, "I don't know." And my son asked me if I was crazy, and I said, "Probably, but I'm not ready for a nursing home yet." At the time, I was 59. Most people at 59 are starting to take a quieter life and take things a bit easier. I was making things much more difficult for myself. Not only did I sign up for the Bath Half Marathon, within 2 days of signing up for that, I was also signed up to run the London Marathon 2017, 26.2 miles. Now, in my mind, I thought, well, I can't run, but I know I can walk 26.2 miles, because when I was walking on the Camino day after day, there were some days when I actually walked distances of 17 miles, 20 miles. So I thought, well, if I can't run, at least I can walk it. Nobody says you have to run every step of the way. I then had to learn to train with a guide, and I was tethered to that person by the wrist. In the UK, when we're at school as children, we have a race called the three-legged race, where your right ankle is tethered to the left ankle of the person you're running with, and you have to learn to run in synchronization. So running tethered to a guide is a bit like that, except we were tethered at the wrist, not the ankle. However, it was very important that the coordination was together, because if we weren't coordinated, this was just not going to be successful. Remember, like I said, I didn't run. I knew nothing about running. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. All kinds of things that a runner knows, I didn't. And it was only when we arrived to take on the Bath Half Marathon and someone said to me, "You don't have anything on your back to let people know that you can't see." They quickly wrote out a sign that said blind runner and another one that said guide runner, which they pinned onto the back of my guide. Between then and the London Marathon, which was 6 weeks later, I got my running top printed with very big letters saying blind runner, because it was important that other people around you knew that you couldn't see, that they didn't try to run between me and my guide, because if they did, that could have been a huge problem. I successfully completed that, and then continued on with the training. And it was sometime after I'd finished the Bath Half Marathon that someone said to me, "Why don't you write a book?" And I said, "Who'd want to read that?" And they said, "You'd be surprised." Well, I have been surprised. And I said, "Well, that's a silly idea." I said, "I write a blog page. People can read on there." And they said, "Yes, but the blog page is about your running. It's about your guide dog. It's about your fundraising, but it isn't about you." And once the seed was planted in my head, the idea started to grow. The more I thought about it, the more I thought, maybe I could do this. So when I had completed the London Marathon in April 2017, I started to think some more about the idea. I talked to a few different people about how I could approach this, how I would tackle it. Did they think it was a good idea? And I started the planning and the preparation for the book. My main reason in the end for running the London Marathon was to raise money for guide dogs. And I had to raise £2,000, which anybody who runs for charity has to do that. I was more successful than that and managed to actually raise £7,500 for guide dogs, which enabled me to sponsor another guide dog puppy. Also, even before I actually ran that race, Guide Dogs event team said to me, "Would you run for us again next year?" And it was nothing to do with my running skills. It was to do with my fundraising skills. One thing I've learned over the last 18 years since I had my first guide dog, I'm now on dog number 3, who is called Poppy, is that fundraising is something I do really well. I have lots of ideas. I'm willing to put in the work, and it is a lot of hard work. Somebody said to me once, it's easy to put your hand in your pocket and put £1 or $1 in a bucket. It's not so easy to give your time. However, I find it very rewarding and I enjoy what I do. So once I'd finished the London Marathon and I'd crossed the line and I'd loved every minute of it, the whole journey, I thought, yes, I want to do this again. The lady who partnered me said no, she'd been there, done that, got the t-shirt. She did not want to do it again. So I found another guide, someone who had helped me along the way and given me advice about the running, though there were a lot of things I didn't know before I took part in the race. And I do share those things within my book. So I signed up to do the London Marathon again the next year. The lady who wanted to partner me said, "You need to do something different. We can't just do the Bath Half and the London Marathon. You need to be doing something else to inspire people to want to sponsor you and to support you." So she said to me, "How's your swimming?" I thought, I know where this is going. I said, "Slow. Will you sink if I throw you in?" "No." I said, "I won't." She said, "That's fine. We can work on that. What I can tell you, I could not swim properly at all. I think I'd always had a bit of a fear of the water, especially because in the water, I had 2 impaired senses, was not able to hear or to see." Then she said to me, "How's your cycling?" "I've never been on a bike." "You'll be fine. I will get a tandem," she said. And before I knew where I was signed up to take on my first triathlon at the age of 61. Well, I think my children all thought I had completely lost the plot. So the second year, in 2018, I took on the Bath Half Marathon, the Yeovil Half Marathon, a Yeovilton 10K, the London Marathon, another 10K, and then finished the year in September with the triathlon. And I can honestly say I love them all. I love the triathlon. I still train for triathlon. I train twice a week, doing cardio exercises, weights, swimming. And from being a very nervous swimmer, I now swim properly and try to swim 50 lengths twice a week. And I'm never going to be the fastest, but I have the stamina and I can keep going. So the book, so what happened there? So I'll just show you what it looks like. That's the front cover. And there's the back cover. With information inside.
Yes, we can see that. We can see.
Yeah. Anyway, so I decided when I started to write the book, I decided I would write the book with two storylines. And instead of labeling the chapters as chapter 1, chapter 2, I decided I would label them as mile 1, mile 2, all the way up to mile 26.2. And that would be my number of chapters, because that is the number of miles in a marathon. And I also felt that life is a marathon. It's a journey on its own. So labeling the chapters this way felt appropriate. I start the prologue with my earliest memory, which was the hospital when I was 5, being diagnosed with hearing loss. Chapter 1 starts with how I came to be running the marathon. And then chapter 2, or mile 2, continues with my personal life story from 5, working through my life. And in the end, the timelines come together. Though people may think, oh, well, the running journey, that's going to be predictable. And we know she has sight loss, and we know she has hearing loss, and she's got arthritis. So it's going to be a predictable read. It isn't. I can tell you absolutely it isn't. People have said they never saw what was coming. They had no idea. They continued to be surprised over and over again. I've been told it's an easy book to read, not because the language is simple, but because I've been told it's well written and it's all very clear. People have said they didn't want to put it down. They wanted to keep reading. I have been absolutely staggered by the feedback I've had since the book came out. Writing the book itself was a challenge. The actual putting the book together initially wasn't so much of a problem. I planned it very carefully, how I was going to write it, how I would break down the timeline. And then the first draft took me, after the planning, 4 months to write. And then it was keep going through it and changing the draft and checking for mistakes, getting someone to proofread it. And then the difficult bit was actually getting it published, because I didn't know what I was doing. Unfortunately, it was around that time that we were dealing with the pandemic, and that didn't help things at all, because it was difficult to see people. And though at the time I was very frustrated that the book wasn't going anywhere, I don't think it was the right time. Whereas now, this feels like it is, because you can actually see people. I can go out, I can go to events, I can sign books. Whereas if it had been a few years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do any of those things. I was fortunate in the end. I managed to find a printer less than 2 miles from where I live, and they printed the book and bound it, and I'm delighted with the finished product. I have the book is available as a standard book and a large print book at the moment. And at some point, following on from this, there will be an audio copy for people who are sight impaired that can't read the book, that are interested. And also, I gather lots of people enjoy listening to audiobooks anyway, whether they're traveling or what else they're doing. Does anybody have any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, shall I ask one question? There's one question posed by a participant.
Sorry?
There is a question from the participant.
Yeah.
Okay. The question is how one could get inspired like you even at the age of 40 plus or 50 plus or elderly. Elderly age is the age we usually lack motivation and stamina. So, could you please tell how one could get inspired like you even at the age of 40 or 50 or elderly?
Um, I think what if someone's living with any kind of disability, I believe that your biggest disability is feeling sorry for yourself. So the biggest disability I could have would be self-pity. So what's important is to make sure that you're around positive people, people who encourage you to do the best you can, rather than um, limiting what you can do. So instead of seeing the challenges as obstacles, try and find a way around those obstacles. So there are some things I will never be able to do, like drive, and that's not going to change. So I just feel it's a waste of time actually putting any energy into worrying that I can't drive. No amount of worrying will change that. So it's about finding something that interests you, whatever that is, and finding a way to actually do that. Because when I was 20, I couldn't run. I'd never ridden a bike. I couldn't swim properly. And then at 61, I learned to do all of those things. So I think it's actually getting to the point where you have the confidence to actually think, do you know what? Yes, I can do this. And it's not about what you can't do. Focus on what you can. If you get the right help, there are so many things that people can do if they want it badly enough.
Okay, thank you, Helen. That was the question asked by one of the participants on the behalf of Global Forum for Teacher Educators. I once again thank you for this wonderful webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.